This video solves 2 major sewing problems. 1. Too many scraps. 2. Nowhere to put the scraps. That's right, my friends. Today we're going to make boxes for our scraps out of scraps. Genius! And just for funsies, we're gonna use a historically adequate technique known as crazy Victorian patchwork. Yeah! High five. Ready? Ready? Go team! Unfortunately, the worst part of this is going to be sorting all of these scraps, and guess what has to come first? That's right. Guess I'm gonna have to go put on some scrap sorting clothes. For those of you who aren't familiar with the process, crazy Victorian patchwork is a technique that was popular during the bustle periods of the 1870s and 1880s. Instead of the normal style of patchwork with its structured lines and patterns, this takes all the weird pieces you have and puts them together helter-skelter, blending each wild shape with embroidery to create a more cohesive design. The great thing about this practice is that it eliminates all those weird bits and bobs of scrap fabric that you don't have the heart to throw away, but can't actually use for anything else. This takes the concept of piecing his period to a whole new level. Doesn't Past Jackie look like she's having a great time? Let's leave her in her misery for a bit, eh? Also, what is this concert tee doing in my scrap pile? That took more than 2 hours. It was extremely overwhelming, and the only way that I was able to get myself through it, I promised to get myself a little treat. Also, you would think that organizing and sorting all of these scraps would make my apartment cleaner, but somehow it wrecked my apartment. Let's go back over to the coffee table and I'll show you what I've done. I have 3 workable piles: neutrals, cool tones, and warm tones. Huge array of different patterns and colors in here. Obviously, I do not have a single palette. I like a lot of bright colors. I also have all of the scraps that I've organized that are not suitable for this project. They're currently in plastic bags in the bins that had scraps in them previously. This one and this bag. Now this is basically all of my silk and wool scraps, which are either too sheer or too expensive to use for something like this, as well as all of my utilitarian scraps, the strips of white cotton, the strips of black cotton, the strips of linen. These are the things that get used when I need to piece or I need to fix a hole or whatever. And no matter how hard I try, I cannot get rid of all of the tulle in my apartment. Okay, let's go cut out a base for our box. I'm basing this off of a tutorial for a fabric box I found on the internet. It's going to make a box about 7 inches wide and 5 inches deep. Not very big, but since we're not sure if Past Jackie is going to enjoy this process, this is serving as her little amuse-bouche tester project. This particular box includes an attached lid, which is paramount to our goals. Here's the schematic I'm basing it off of. And just to use up more scrap, I've opted to use some horrible polyester sheet scraps that were once a skirt mock-up. Haha, psych! Pow! This was getting stuck to the iron either by static electricity or just because it's so gross and plasticky. I would have preferred to use this, but it's going to be a nightmare to work with. It's not going to iron right, and frankly, trying to get this on grain was going to be absolutely miserable. I did not do it while I was drawing it, so I ripped myself a new one. So it is perfectly on grain. There is 100% chance that this box is going to be crooked when we're finished, so we need to eliminate as many obstacles to that as we can. There is a great free resource for crazy Victorian patchwork available on archive.org. It's this cute little booklet from the time period with instructions as well as plenty of embroidery designs for you to go off of. I've linked to it in the description for you. I label each side of the box directly onto my muslin base. We're going to start with the bottom. The goal is to use up some of the more unsightly scraps left over from things I've made for others, or, you know, the atrocious yellow poly satin that was only ever appropriate for Taco Bell. I found that having an iron nearby to press under the seam allowances was very handy for this process. Finger pressing worked okay for some of the fabrics, but it wasn't great for those little corners that wanted to fray. Yep, and there's some of that horrible brown I used that one time I turned myself into a potato. Anyone else remember the Renaissance potato incident? Or historical weird Barbie? I thought the spandex might be problematic with all this woven fabric, but it behaved itself surprisingly well. I'm gonna let you into a little secret. I attempted to make a patchwork quilt once when I first moved to Texas. It was one of the most unpleasant sewing experiences of my life. I vowed never to do it again. but that was regular style patchwork. I hated having to make completely straight lines. I hated all of the 90-degree angles and all of the precision. Will this method be a little more pleasant? Let's see. By some weird coincidence of the universe, my friend recently went to a quilt show and looked at some of these crazy patchwork quilts. It was really interesting to hear her talk about it because she said they used all sorts of stuff. Fabric from cigar bags, prize ribbons, anything that they had laying around could be used and was used to make these crazy quilts. All right, this is as far as I got last night. So basically the bottom and the sides. And voila, and I have this little snaky guy that's gonna come up and down over the lid, which is fun. This is only about an hour and a half of work. I just did a prick stitch over all of this. The instructions say to baste everything and then you permanently sew everything with the embroidery, but I don't have the patience to baste all of this, and also this way I don't have to embroider every single line. Because this is gonna be a box, the bottom I'm not gonna embroider at all because it's gonna be on a flat surface and I don't want it to have any extra wiggle. And also a prick stitch is really fast. In fact, I do a prick stitch much faster than I do a basting stitch, and you don't have to take it out afterwards. I'm surprised to find that I'm actually quite enjoying this. We'll see what the embroidery holds, because that may be the thing that is the most tedious, but I do plenty of embroidery projects, so I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm sure that the embroidery will take longer. I definitely think that it would have done better if I had tried to come up with some kind of color theme or story instead of just placing random colors, but that was never the intention for this box. This box is trying to eat up some of these uglier fabrics that I don't really want on other projects, because I do think I will be doing this to other projects. So let's go and do some embroidery. The plan is to use up some of this large amount of very substandard embroidery floss I bought when I first started. Here's the preliminary attempt. Just as I expected, the embroidery was absolutely the biggest time suck. And it wasn't so much like the physical act of embroidering it onto the fabric. It was picking a color that was complementary to all of the colors in the section, cutting the embroidery floss and detangling several strands from it. It was, in my case, also completely detangling the skein of embroidery floss and then waxing the thread. And then it was going through the book and picking a design and then figuring out how the heck to do the design, because there are very little instructions in there, and then doing the embroidery and, you know, having to repeat that 6 or 7 times. So I made a couple of decisions. Firstly, I did about 5 different stitches on the sides, and I think I'm going to stick with those stitches and only those stitches for the rest of the box. I feel like this is definitely a skill and a project that gets faster the more you do it, when you're not trying to figure out all of those different stitches and can just go, 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 go. I also really regret not picking a color scheme, because I have bright and pastel embroidery floss and I'm specifically only trying to use those. I was really struggling to get things to look good. So moving forward for the next portion of the box, I'm gonna try and tone the color choices down a little bit. I'm sad that I won't be able to use some of the uglier stuff that I want to get rid of, but for this particular case, let's just pick a scheme and go with it. Before I show you all the embroidery stitches, we need something more to embroider, so let's sit down and patch together the back, top, and lid of our scrap box. Another tip for this process is to make your seam allowances large. I started off trying to turn under the tiniest of edges, and those pesky threads just want to poke out at you. This is literal garbage here we're trying to salvage, so there's no need to be stingy. Make your life easier and give yourself a wider seam allowance. I hope you're enjoying this video. This was a fun little interlude project to work on while I'm trying to make a new pair of Regency stays. And I think it's such a great technique that pretty much anyone can use at some level or another. I'd love to know in the comments if you've attempted this technique or would like to, or would never be caught dead doing something like this. And while you're down there, I would love if you could give this video a thumbs up. These small little things really help this channel out, and it is so much appreciated. I'd also like to shout out to my contributors over on Ko-fi. Your continued support means I can continue making videos, and it means so much to have you there. I've linked below if you have the means to contribute, but just by watching this video, you're helping out, and therefore, you are awesome. Here's the finished back, top, and lid. I think this looks a lot more aesthetic. And now let's talk about the embroidery stitches I ended up using. There are two different series. First, the X series. The first and fastest is just your standard X or cross of floss. Then there's the one I've dubbed Morse X because it's X-X-, and it reminds me of Morse code. Finally, your standard old herringbone stitch, or what I'm calling a herringbone stitch, don't at me. Then there's the shell series. This one is what I've been calling the vine, which is basically a back stitch with a V on either side of it, and it ends up looking like this. Next, the alternating shell, which is a 3-stitch shell with a back stitch on either side. This requires a little flippy flipperoo, but the effort is well worth it. Finally, the fancy shell, a 5-stitch shell with back stitches and French knots. Absolutely the fairest of them all, but like most very attractive people, extremely high maintenance. It's the most time consuming of all the ones I've used. You've been warned. With the embroidery done, it was time to cut out a piece for the lining. No patchwork this time, let's pick something with a little bit of slip, as well as cutting out one from a cereal box for extra stability. Ran into a slight problem with this because I don't eat cereal, or really anything that comes in a box. Luckily, the very day I decided to do this project, I discovered my coworker eats an excessive amount of processed foods. Okay, let's turn this crazy bit of patchwork into something useful. The instructions for the box don't make any sense to me and are lacking photos that are actually helpful, at least for my kind of brain. So from here, we're going to wing it and hope for the best. Here's it all turned out and pressed. Now we'll stick the cardboard in. I had to trim it down a bit to get it to fit in the hole. To secure the rest of the seam allowances, I'm opting to use hot glue because it's fast. It's a box, who cares? Then you can use more hot glue to secure the sides a little. You can skip this step if you want, but I found it helpful. And then you can go back with some more embroidery floss and stitch the sides together so it's nice and secure. Unfortunately, despite all of my best efforts, that barely put a dent in my giant scrap pile. And here it is. Here's the finished box. It'll come as no surprise to you that somehow I did the math wrong and there was supposed to be a lip that went on the side of the box with the lid. I don't know what I did wrong, but that's okay because I have plenty of scraps left over and it'll be no problem to cut out a cardboard piece this big, slap some more fabric and embroidery on it, and voila, I'll have a functional lid. I also think it might be kind of cool if I put a little magnet closure here, get one of those like purse clasp hooks. I don't have one of those right now, but next time I order from Wawalk, I'll pop one into my cart. That'll be super useful. One complaint I have that I suspected was going to be a problem when I stole that cereal box was that it's not very sturdy. Like with that pasteboard or whatever it's called, it feels like if I were to stack more than one of these boxes on top of this, it would just crush. If you want something sturdy and you want to try this project, highly recommend using a thicker cardboard. But otherwise, not bad for cobbling this together in a week. It's only slightly crooked, probably the best cube I've ever made. Go me! I'm sure you could do better. I cannot believe how fun this project was. I've already started sorting my leftover scraps into more cohesive color designs, and I plan to make a new knitting bag and a new full-on giant sewing project bag. And then hopefully when I'm done, I'll have enough scraps to make a big scrap box. Once I figure out that math, I'm not looking forward to that. If you enjoyed this video, why not check out this one here, where I transform some of the biggest fails in my mending pile into very cute, wearable new outfits. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. I love y'all, and I'll catch you in my next video.